the Israeli government is not concerned with its hostages. If they were, they would have engaged in good faith negotiations. The diplomatic negotiations led to the relief of 136 hostages. That wasn't any military operations. After 5 months, they've only extracted 2 hostages. We know that the families want a truce. We know that the government is opposing a truce. We know that the concern is not the hostages. Israel shot to kill 2 of them, 2 of their own, who were raising white flags and speaking in Hebrew, giving us an idea that this is not a legitimate war. This is a genocidal campaign of extermination. Last night, the images that came out of Rafah are horrifying. There was a young girl, her legs cut off, hanging off of a wire by her shirt. This is disproportionate, excessive force that is meant to terrorize a population that is telling them, you have no life here. There is no future here. You must leave. That is the message that is being sent. We're seeing young children who are forced to be far older than their age. A young boy who escaped bombing, having his head and the blood cleaned off of it, telling the world, "No bakhafish, I am not scared." How can he not be scared in this situation? How are all of us not terrified? We have taken away life for these children. We are decimating their future, even if we do survive. Images of babies who are being removed from the rubble with only 2 limbs, with no family members left. What is their future? And yet we're obscuring these atrocities. We're obscuring these genocidal campaigns with words of distraction. We're taking it and abstracting it to warfare and strategy, hostages, and the negotiations, when the humanitarian situation speaks for itself, when tribunals have told us repeatedly, this is a genocide. It must be ended unequivocally, and that is incumbent upon us now before we see the last city in Gaza, the one that is normally home to 220,000 Palestinians, now housing 1.5 million Palestinians, 80% of the population, in tents and in dire humanitarian situation. We should be rushing in to treat them with medicine, with food, with water, with adequate care, rather than now preparing massacres for them, like the speaker before you, Dua, who has created a GoFundMe to save herself and her children. This is our responsibility. Last word on this. There is a concept in international law known as state responsibility, where a state must deal with the consequences of its actions. Israel cannot say that it is now fighting a war of self-defense, which it doesn't have a right to under international law, against territory that it occupies. But if those actions are illegal, it must bear the consequences for them. Israel has imposed a siege against international law for 17 years, imposed a prolonged military occupation for 56 years, imposed an apartheid regime, which is a crime against humanity, that the international community has said is an apartheid regime, and still asking the world for an exception and blaming the Palestinians as the assailants, as it is committing a genocide, and now asking the world to let it commit genocide as a form of exception, that somehow it is like any other situation, and rather than meet that with the full force of diplomatic and international will to rebuff it, instead we're allowing Israel to create that exception, which will make none of the world safe. When other powerful countries and nuclear powers decide that they want to decimate inconvenient population, a native population as in this case, in order to fulfill its national interests. It defies all of the logic of international legal institutions and international law, which are set up to regulate things like this in this very moment.